Hello everybody and welcome back to Let's Play ChäoS Ed. One second, I need to adjust my microphone a little bit. There we go. Get my timer started. So, the sun had already set. If possible, I'd prefer to avoid walking around after dark, because lately all it had given me were nasty memories. I unthinkingly hastened my pace, hurrying down the road to the store. Today's Saturday, so I wouldn't have expected to cross paths with any number of pedestrians, but so far I hadn't encountered a single one. The stores that were always open had been closed. It was a tad strange. Maybe I was under the wrong impression, like thinking it was 7 p.m. when it was actually around 2 a.m. Okay, maybe not. Even so, it was far too quiet. For the most part, I couldn't hear any miscellaneous city noises. The town's ambience was different than usual. I arrived at the convenience store in the Shinsen Plaza. The plaza was in front of the train station, but there wasn't a single person here either. I was gradually starting to get scared. The sudden absence of something I had taken for granted, that alone was enough to give me the sense that I had fallen into another world. Under ordinary circumstances, I skirted away from meeting with and talking to people, but right now I just wanted to see someone's face. I ran inside the convenience store. There absolutely had to be a clerk here, so I thought as I surveyed the store's interior. No one was there. I think it was a green delusion we did last time, wasn't it? So... red. No customers. Not even a cashier.
まさか。
This was impossible. The cashier had to be doing something in the back of the store. If I brought some goods up to the register, they'd soon re-emerge. That was why, in the end, I took my time picking a boxed lunch. While pretending to check out some manga magazines, I set my boxed lunch down by the register. No one came out after all. Somehow, I had a bad feeling about this. It wasn't normal at all. Maybe I had stumbled into some truly unthinkable scene. Standing in front of the register, I cast a careless look outside the store. Beyond the automatic glass doors lay the road upon which not a single person was walking. I saw a human form in the shadows of the apartment complexes sandwiching the street.
Huh?
The form soon hid away. Even so, I had seen it distinctly. The figure's hand had been holding up something like a long black pipe. It resembled... wasn't it a sniper rifle? This meant that they were the riot police, or alternatively a SAT team. I hadn't seen any shoppers or cashiers because the police had sealed off the area. But for what purpose? Having thought that far, I gave myself a start. I swiftly looked around the inside of the store, then concealed myself in the shadow of a shelf. What if there was currently a standoff taking place right now, in this very store? The criminal, having taken the cashier hostage, could have holed up in the back room. And that criminal might be the true new-gen perpetrator. What a development. I crouched in place and cradled my head. Why had I ended up coming into such a dangerous place? More importantly, the police were the police. If you shut down the area, you should have stopped me before I went into the store. Was there any way for me to go outside? If I stayed here, I'd end up as a hostage too. Luckily, I hadn't bumped into the criminal yet. If he was holding up in the back room, it would be best to flee now. I was so frightened, my knees quaked. It took a tremendous effort to merely stand up. Even so, I hovered low and stealthily made for the automatic door. It began with a kind of cliched declaration that you wouldn't even hear on TV detective shows anymore. From outside the store, a policeman began roaring through an amplifier. Startled, I hid deeper in the shadows of the shelving. What an endlessly stereotypical way to call him out. Don't you have a negotiator or something? So short. 30 seconds, he said. Leaping into action, do you mean to expose the hostages to danger? Do that in contemporary Japan and the public and the media will bash you like there's no tomorrow. What the hell were the police thinking? I stifled my breathing and curled up into a ball, my heart hammered away incredibly fast. It felt like it would tear itself to pieces. If the police broke their way in by force, this convenience store would surely become a battlefield. I'd get caught up in it without having any say in the matter. I might die from being hit by a stray bullet. Anything but that. I couldn't see the criminal's movements. The store was silent. I became irritated. Why was the criminal acting like such a freaking idiot? Hurry up and surrender, please. If you don't, I'll get tangled up in it. I tentatively peeked out from behind the shelf and looked outside once more. What I saw shocked me. Several sharpshooters, their sniper rifles at the ready, were camped out in an area easily visible from here. I hurriedly whipped my head back in. The police meant to shoot the criminal to death. Would they be able to get away with that kind of thing in Japan? I couldn't believe this. This has to be a lie. Give me a fucking break. As I looked around and around the area, I caught a glimpse of my hand.
Huh?
For some reason, my hand was gripping a long knife. On top of that, the blade was glistening red. This was blood. I grew bewildered. Since when had I had a knife? No, rather, where had I gotten this knife from? From close by came the sound of someone groaning. A clerk was lying there. A bleary-looking man, probably a college student, his hands were bound behind him and his mouth was sealed with packing tape. The clerk stared at me. His eyes were dyed the color of terror. Why are you looking at me? Don't look at me like that. It almost makes you seem like you're looking at a criminal. A criminal? Was I the criminal? No, it wasn't me. I haven't done anything. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie. There's no such thing as policemen like that. Anyway, what was up with the whole yelling fire bit? It's not as if this were a Sengoku-era battle. Several minutes passed while I fantasized. There was no indication that a cashier would appear. I very much wanted to believe that the clerk had dozed off, so I tried waiting another 5 minutes. But in that time, neither a cashier nor any other customers appeared. I didn't even hear any sounds. At last, I became frightened and returned the boxed lunch to its original shelf before leaving. I guess no food for us tonight. I went to a railroad crossing located close beside the station. From here, I had a good view of the Shinsen Station platform. I presumed that here, if nowhere else, couldn't possibly be devoid of people, but no one was there after all. I waited for the train to come in. Once it came, there would have to be passengers getting off. Even if no one left, I'd see them riding in the train as it passed before me. I waited for 10 minutes, and still no train came. I tried to make myself think there'd been a fatal accident, one that had messed up the train schedules. But as before, no customers whatsoever emerged onto the platform. Having come to this point, I finally realized the gravity of the situation. Strange. This was bizarre. Oh yeah, I should try going to Shibuya Station. People would definitely be there, no doubt about it. 24 hours a day, it didn't matter when, people were always, without fail, in the Shibuya Station Plaza. I broke into a run without a moment's hesitation. I ran as if my life depended on it. I didn't want to stop, even when my breath came up short. It might have been the first time I'd run with all my might since I was born. As I ran, I prayed for this to be some kind of tasteless nightmare, but it wasn't a dream. My heart and lungs hurt so badly it felt like they were shredding. It was a pain that transcended the dimension of dreams. I was surprised at the extreme fervor of my own breathing. It hurt no matter how much air I sucked in. As I ran down Dugan Hill, or however it's pronounced, I finally caught sight of the 107 building. By now, my legs had gone unsteady, and my body felt astoundingly heavy. Even so, I forced my feet to keep moving forward. I could no longer afford to keep an eye on my surroundings. On the contrary, the entirety of my consciousness was focused on the pedestrian scramble that symbolized Shibuya. A little longer. Just a little longer. Once I passed 107, I'd be right there. The largest in Japan. It was the place in Japan where the largest number of people came swarming together all at once, moving simultaneously with changing of the traffic signals, which is why I had to get to the scramble. The scramble. Empty. The Shibuya Station Plaza, which you could survey from the Y-shaped road in front of 107. A soundless world. A dead-seeming world. This space that was supposed to be flooded with sounds was now governed by silence. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing. In the middle of the wide street, I fell heavily to my knees. I couldn't walk any further than this. The shock had drained all the strength from my body. Right, left, front, back, everywhere. No one was there, even though 7 on a Saturday night was a time when Shibuya ought to be the most crowded of all. But what was happening? It was a lie. This had to be a lie. I closed my eyes and nursed my head. This was a dream. An illusion. There was no way this could be reality. Yes, I had thought I wanted to live a quiet and peaceful life by myself. I didn't want anyone to meddle with me, and I didn't want to get involved in anything. But I hadn't wished for a world without anyone else in it. If no one was there, who would pay for my living expenses? If no one was there, who would make convenience store box lunches for me to eat? If no one was there, who would play ESO with me? If no one was there, who would maintain the servers for ESO so you could keep playing it? A sound. I heard a sound. It wasn't me. Someone else had made it. Someone was here. Someone other than me was close by here. I felt like I'd reached salvation. As I thought, it had coincidentally happened to appear like no one was here. In truth, not one person had disappeared. I hadn't been left behind in the world all alone. I was so relieved I almost cried. I set my gaze in the direction the sound had come from. The one there was a boy in a wheelchair. A short distance away from me, though still in the middle of the crossing, he sat quietly in place. At the moment, I couldn't tell quite how old he was, going by the size of his body. He could only have been an elementary school student. Because his hat was pulled down low over his eyes, I couldn't see much of his expression. Except...
やっと会えたね。
The boy's voice sounded particularly clear to me. Feeling as though he'd whispered right into my ear, I unintentionally whirled around. But of course, there was no one behind me.
これどうなってるんですか?
Though he was younger than me, I found myself speaking formally.
どうして誰もいないのか? 君は理由を知ってますか? 知ってるよ。
Despite the fact that his voice sounded young, there was nothing childish about its ambience.
それより、僕のメッセージは受け取ってくれた?
Message? I didn't know what he was talking about.
誰だ? 君は.
Okay, I guess I accidentally clicked a little too soon. The boy moved his wheelchair a tiny bit forward. Perhaps because it was old, simply going forward made it let out rusty noises.
その目誰の目? でしょ?
I was confused. Why had this boy murmured, "Whose eyes are those?" here and now? What in the world was he?
目覚めるんだ。早く出ないと。もっとたくさんの人が。君は一体。
I keep forgetting that just the way the dialogue is, that there are sometimes these slightly longer pauses than I would like between words, and so I sometimes think they're done when they're not. I rubbed my eyes, wiping away my tears. Thanks to that, I was finally able to take a clear look at the boy's face. This boy wasn't even a boy. His skin was wrinkled as an old man's. His cheeks were gaunt. His eyes' sockets were sunken to a sickly extent. His eyes were clouded. He had no eyebrows. How can you tell he has no eyebrows? The hood's... just... well... yeah, no. Okay, I guess eyes there. I mean, I don't think you'd really be able to see the eyebrows still, because the eyes would be, like, right about here. So, yeah, no. Don't think you can see the eyebrows no matter what. And his body was as small as a child's.
僕は将軍だよ。
For a second, I forgot to breathe. My head rocked with an impact akin to that of being struck by a hammer. The ground shook. No, my body was tilting. I splayed a... excuse me. I splayed a hand on the asphalt, holding myself up. Just now, what had he said? Shogun. He was... Shogun?
忘れないで。君は逃げちゃいけない。
I raised my head and watched as Shogun, who had already turned his back to me, left. His wheelchair creaked as it slowly receded into the distance. I thought about chasing after him and demanding all kinds of answers from him. But I didn't think of telling him, "How dare you get me involved and hitting me, and hitting him." That sort of thing didn't agree with me. My head had started aching. The area around my temple throbbed sharply. I curled into the fetal position and endured the pain.
タク。
A single noise began to spread throughout the soundless world. Whose voice was this? Don't look at me.
タク。
The thing that had been a noise gradually transmuted into a real voice. Someone had placed a gentle hand on my shoulder.
邪魔なんだっつうの。
何してんだろうね。
最近の若いもんは。
なんかのパフォーマンスじゃないの？
タク。
Fighting with my headache, I raised my gaze. The demon girl, Rimi, was crouching over me, peering into my face. Clear eyes filled with life. Eyes that looked wholeheartedly at me. Only at me. Again. Again, this girl had appeared so suddenly.
歩ける？歩いて。
She slipped her hand around my side and tried to make me stand up. I shrieked and shook her off. Coming back to myself, I looked around. As before, I was in the middle of the road, but it wasn't empty anymore. There were people 360 degrees around me, in every direction, and they all walked whichever way they pleased without showing any interest in me.
タク。
Looking as if she were about to cry, Rimi extended a hand towards me.
今は私の言うことを聞いて。夜だ！
When I yelled, the throbbing in my head changed into the direct pain. Even so, intent and uncaring, I crawled to open more distance between me and Rimi.
お前だろ！お前が見せたんだ！お前の妄想だ！僕の心を支配して精神攻撃を。この悪魔め！お前なんて剣で殺してやる！
Of course, it should be noted if this story took place in a world in which people actually gave a crap about mental health of other people. I can confidently say that our main character here would more than likely have already been sent off to a psych ward at some point in the past. especially over the course of some of the things we've seen um, while playing right now.
ベースに帰れば僕には理想
An abrupt shock shook through my cheek. It stung and began to go hot. Remy had slapped me. She was gonna kill me for sure now. On all fours, I scrambled this way and that across the ground, but Remy grabbed my hand in a flash. She pulled me toward her with a strength I found to be unbelievable coming from a girl. She embraced me. Her soft form enveloped me tenderly. She was very warm. She smelled ever so faintly of sweat. Her smooth, shiny hair tickled the end of my nose.
しっかりして。
With the wind out of my sails, my whole body threatened to go limp.
ここにいたら危ないよ。
There was a silent catch to her voice. I didn't know whether or not she was crying.
信号赤になっちゃってるから。
Yes, that's the reason why it's dangerous to stay there. I was lost. She didn't intend to kill me? Why was she helping me? That hallucination from earlier where all the people in Shibuya vanished, it wasn't something she'd made me see? When I sensed some kind of... When I sensed such kind-hearted warmth, when she hugged me without the least bit of malice, it had the effect of shaking everything I'd believed up until now. It made me think about Sakiyata Rimi. It wasn't a demon at all. Was I foolish? Was she pulling the wool over my eyes? Except, one thing alone had become certain. With Rimi holding me, I felt incredibly relieved. I didn't know what to call this peculiar situation. Upon letting go of me, Rimi clasped my face in her hands and looked at me steadily again. Her eyes were a little reddish.
お願い。今は私についてきていい？
Somehow, I ended up nodding. Right now, we were standing all alone in the middle of the crossing that everyone had vacated. The vast numbers of people waiting on the sidewalk for the light to change were paying close attention to us. I heard laughing voices coming from here and there. Myriad cars pointed their headlights at us and began blaring their horns. Rimi took a firm grip on my hand and began running toward the sidewalk. I followed in her wake as she pulled me. As the honking horns scattered across us, we made it to the sidewalk. Rimi let out a relieved breath and pulled up short. She was still holding my hand. That by itself made my heart grow calmer and calmer. I wanted to give myself over to this serenity. I wanted to stay like this forever. Rimi turned back in my direction.
無事でよかったね。
She smiled, as though she were tremendously happy. I didn't think that expression of hers was a lie or an act. But
話してよ
because up until now I had been utterly hostile toward her, because I had thought that she was a demon. If I let her win me over, I'd feel like I'd cease being myself.
あ、ごめんごめん。
She quickly dropped my hand.
それにしてもびっくりした。タクが道の真ん中でうずくまってるんだもん。信号が赤になった時はどうなることかと。
I turned my back to Rimi as she began talking cheerfully. I walked off, winding my way through the hordes of people.
僕帰る
じゃあ送るよ。具合悪いんでしょ？
Her voice followed me from behind, but I shook my head to refuse her.
タク。
The cheerfulness had vanished from Rimi's voice. I felt awful, since she'd done so much to help me, so...
ありがとう
I barely, just barely managed to squeeze out those two words. Got about 5 minutes left on the timer, but to be honest, I kind of feel like this is a really decent stopping point for this episode. So this episode is going to be a little bit shorter than usual. Because yeah, that just seems like a nice stopping point. So yeah, yeah, I will see you all next time. A quick reminder that I do have a Patreon and a Discord. You can find links to those down below in the description. I do highly recommend that you join the Discord so you can stay updated on channel happenings. That is my go-to place for posting about interruptions to my recording and or streaming schedule. And, well, that's mainly it, really. That's mostly all I use it for, to be honest. There's not a significant community there right now, so it doesn't have much other use beyond that. As for the Patreon, that is the easiest and best way to help support the channel if you find yourself enjoying the content. If you find yourself enjoying my live streams when I do those, I typically do them Saturday nights. I used to try to do Fridays, but that doesn't really work. So I typically do them Saturday nights. Sometimes it gets pushed to Sunday, but usually, like I said, it's Saturday nights. Well, Saturday night's my time. Typically, it starts around about 10 p.m. Eastern time. And I typically go for around about 2 hours until midnight, maybe a little bit after, but yeah. Around about 2 hours is typically what I shoot for. But yeah, so that'll be it for this part. Like I said, I will see you all next time, but until then, a goodbye and farewell.